Hello, in today's video, we're going to be taking care of a pretty annoying brake squeal, which happens more so under light braking, coming from the front brakes on this 2016 Honda CRV. And we'll also be replacing the front brake pads while we're at it. Before getting started, we'll want to set the parking brake. Doing this will prevent the vehicle from moving while we're lifting it and while we're working on it. But while we got it on the ground, we'll want to loosen all 5 lug nuts using a 19mm socket. And if you got a wheel lock, you'll need to use that wheel lock key for that specific lug nut. You only got to loosen them about a quarter of a turn. Once we get that done, we can position our jack under its lifting point, which is this pinch weld section, which extends a little further down. We set our jack puck under it and begin to lift it till the wheel's off the ground. Once we got it up high enough, we can support it with a jack stand. Now that we got it lifted and supported, we can remove the lug nuts and the wheel. Giving us access to our brakes. When it comes to knowing when to replace the brake pads, I have these little gauges to measure the amount of material left on the pad. Anything in the green is still good with plenty of material left. Anything in the yellow is kind of a moderate amount, but can be changed if you prefer, while the red means it's low and they should be changed. And as you can see, this one appears in the yellow with 6mm of material left, but customer decided he'd rather change them, so I'm going to be replacing them. And now to remove our brake caliper. It'll have 2 bolts attaching it, and for this we use a 12mm socket to loosen both of them. With both of them loose, let's go ahead and remove them. Once we get them both out, let's slide out the caliper and place it out of the way for now. I like to hang it on the strut, but you'll want to be careful that it doesn't fall off. Next we'll need to remove these 2 caliper support springs, and they just sit in these 2 holes on the brake pads. And even though they're the same, I like to put them back where I remove them, so I lay them on the ground the same way. Now to remove the old brake pads, just slide them back and tilt them off of the bracket. They still look like they have plenty of material left, but I do also like that they were wearing pretty even as well. Now when it comes to your vehicle's brake rotor, this is the surface which the brake pads are compressed against to stop your vehicle. So the more even the surface, the better the brake pad will grip against it. So being that this rotor is even and the surface is not so reflective, we'll still be reusing them. If yours is uneven or reflective like a mirror, they should be resurfaced or replaced. But I have other videos which will show that process in case you need them. But the added steps are just removing the screw that holds the rotor to the hub and removing the 2 bolts that hold the caliper bracket to the spindle, which these bolts are torqued to 101 foot-pounds in case you need them. Well, let's continue on. For this next step, we're going to lubricate our guide pins. Doing this will ensure that our brake pads wear evenly when the brake caliper squeezes the brake pads together. And all we do here is pull the guide pins out, wiping off any of the old grease. Now that we got it clean, we'll grab our brake lubricant, making sure that we lubricate the pin evenly all around and not overdo it with grease either. Now to get it back in, we just push it in and push the rubber boot seal in all around. Doing the same on this other, but this other one will have a rubber insert to keep the caliper from vibrating. And here we got the rubber insert that I was mentioning. Now that we got this pin clean, let's lubricate it as well. Reinstall it, making sure that the seal goes in all around. Now to replace our brake pad retainers, and for this all we do is slide off the old ones by pulling them away from the brake caliper bracket. These don't look too bad, and if you choose to, you can also clean these instead of replacing them, since you want the surface to be as smooth as possible for smooth even braking. It'll also have another up here, pulling this one away from the bracket as well. Now before installing the new ones, let's spray the surface where they go with brake cleaner to clean off any dirt or debris that may have gotten under them. and do a final wipe down with a blue towel. Now for our new replacements. We just want to slide them back into position the same way that they came off. But unfortunately, these are looking like they're not the same fit as the originals. This is way too close to the rotor. And look at this part, it's actually rubbing against the rotor. There is definitely something different with these, and upon comparing them to the original, we can see that yeah, definitely they got extra material on the inside. Well, I decided I'm gonna just end up reusing the originals after cleaning them. So now using some brake cleaner and a blue towel, we'll want to clean them up so we got a smooth clean surface where the brake pad edges slide across. Now that we clean them up, let's go ahead and reinstall them. On to our next step, which is lubricating the contact points on the brake pads. Doing this will help eliminate any sort of vibration that can cause the squealing that the vehicle originally had when it came in. So using our old brake pads as reference, like on this one we're lubricating the area where the piston presses against the brake pad and also the edges where the brake pad slides across the retainers. But when doing this, you do want to make sure to avoid getting any of this on the brake surface where it presses against the rotor, because you don't want to contaminate the surface and affect its grip. Same with this one, but this one being the outward brake pad, we want to lubricate where the caliper's fingers contact the brake pad. Now to install our brake pads, starting with the inner one. This one has a warning tab that we want to install where if the rotor is spinning in the forward direction and starts to contact that warning tab, it's supported by the backing of the pad. So we'll install it pointing up. Now for the outward pad, this one will have the lubrication for the caliper fingers. Alright, this next step is pretty tricky. If you go to install these caliper support springs one at a time, they'll push out the brake pads like this, and will become very frustrating. But what I do is I install one placing the ends into the corresponding holes, then continue squeezing the brake pads together till you get the second spring on. And normally, if I release them very slowly, it should hold until we get the caliper back on. For our next step, we'll need to compress the caliper to accommodate for our new brake pads. But whenever you're doing this, you'll want to keep an eye on the level in the brake reservoir to make sure that it won't overfill. But this one has plenty of room, so we'll be fine. To compress the piston on the caliper, I'll be using an old brake pad plus a caliper compression tool, setting it up like so. So as we rotate the knob clockwise, it'll slowly push the piston back in. Now to install the caliper, rotating the guide pins or pushing them in as needed till the caliper is in properly. Followed by the 2 bolts. You'll want to thread them in by hand as far as you can. This will prevent damaging the threads. Once they're tight, tighten them with the ratchet or torque them to spec. And that completes the brake assembly. Once both sides are completed, you want to get in the car and pump the brake pedal till the pedal stiffens. This will push the piston against the brake pads, removing any space between the pistons and the pads. leaving us to our final step, which is torquing the wheel in a star pattern to 80 foot-pounds, completing this video as well. Well, I hope you were able to find this video helpful and informative. If so, please click that thumbs up button to support my video and my channel, and please subscribe if you haven't done so.